The views and opinions expressed during Love and Life with Lana and Dave are those only of the speakers and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or the position of our podcast hosts or affiliates. Any content provided is not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, individual, anyone, or anything. All right, let's do it.
You're listening to Love and Life with Lana and Dave, the podcast where logic is power and you take control. Thank you for tuning in and making the choice to listen in and get ideas for your own love and life. Now, here are your hosts, Lana Williams and David Vaccaro.
All right, we are in May now. Okay, so let me start off by saying I realize I have not done a podcast in a while. It has been a little crazy. I've been in and out of PT. I'm dealing with some stuff with my knee and an injury and some other things that I'm trying to get done. And so it's been a little crazy, but I'm definitely not out of the game of doing a podcast. I do have a bunch of stuff, a bunch of notes that are sitting around that I'm trying to get organized into some kind of a thing so that I can get a podcast done. So definitely this week I wanted to get something done to make sure that we have something so that you guys don't think that anything happened to me. But you know, with the change of season and a couple of things that needed to be done around the house and just a crazy work schedule and a little bit of physical therapy with this knee injury that I had from last year, it's been a little crazy. But in the meantime, I think today we're going to do a podcast. I don't know that I've come up with a title, but I think I'll probably come up with it as I'm doing this. It's basically going to be, there's been a lot of people that have complained about how bad dating is, right? So, and, you know, being single myself a lot in my life, whether or not I am now or I'm not now is not really relevant, but in my lifetime, I have been single a lot and dated a lot and dealt with a lot of some of the same concepts, regardless of, you know, where or when or, you know, regionally or, you know, my friends, a lot of people that I know that are single are dealing with the same thing. And right now it's, you know, whatever you want to call it out there, like just impossible. And that this is probably one of the worst times for dating ever. And so I actually don't disagree with that. I do believe it's true. But I think there's a reason for it. There's a question out there of, you know, why is dating so bad now? God, it's the worst it's ever been. Why is that? Well, there's several things that have gone on in the past probably 10 years that have changed the trajectory of social equity or social construct, I guess, or the way that we, you know, look at each other as people in society, you know, as males and females, whether we're dating for straight or we're dating for gay or whatever the case may be. We're losing a lot of the conventional stuff that we have been used to. And now some people that are younger are going to say, I don't know what you're talking about. Of course, if you're a lot younger, you're going to have less of an idea of like what history used to be. I'm sure that you've heard a million stories about how dating used to be and how everything's changed from then. And then there's a lot of stuff that people are trying to convey through film and even poetry or, you know, television shows and things like that, that you may see some stuff in media that shows you how it used to be, but it's never really the real truth, right? Obviously, nobody that hasn't lived in 1949 is going to know how it really was. They can convey the story. They can give you their spin on how it was. But for those of us who were, and I was not alive in 1949, but that's an example. For those of us who were around, you know, in the 60s and 70s, the world was a very different place and so much has changed. I mean, there were things that you could do in the 70s that you can't do now. You just can't do them. And there's a whole different podcast. I think I did touch on this before with music and some other stuff as far as like pop culture and things that went on in previous times, right? And I always go back to stuff like Gone with the Wind. So there's a movie that's like a classic, if you lived in the South, in the 60s, this would be a film that you would see in theaters and all that kind of stuff. And it would be a standard by which people saw a lot of things and projected a lot of things, right? And, my theory on Gone with the Wind is that there were a lot of things in that movie that as we move through life and society and understand that things are maybe not a good idea, right? And a lot of my friends and we love our 80s movies, but a lot of 80s movies we grew up to, they didn't age well. Some stuff doesn't age well. Now, that doesn't mean, one, that it's okay and that things that in those movies happen are okay now. We've learned, right? Okay, we did things like this back then. Well, oopsie, bummer for us. We learned that maybe some stuff sucks. Okay. The challenge that I have is to look back at stuff from the 80s that I grew up with, or to look back at stuff from the 30s and the 40s, something like Gone with the Wind, or, Citizen Kane, or, movies like that were old and, we look back and say, wow, this is cinema history. There's nothing wrong with that. I believe that we should educate from the learning curve that we're on, right? And right now we are in uncharted territory, let's put it that way. That in progression as a society and as humanity, we are in a place that we've never been before. So we're constantly arguing with each other about how we should go about things and what's okay and what's not okay and all that kind of stuff. I expect that. I think we should be a little more considerate and humble, modest, diplomatic about how we discuss these things, but that's another story. However, to me, Gone with the Wind, the way that they handled Gone with the Wind was something that I appreciated. And by no means am I the standard that everybody should follow, but we cannot understand mistakes we're making if we don't understand why they're not good things that we're doing. And so to me, there were some things in Gone with the Wind that were there were some racist, bigoted, or maybe chauvinistic things that went on in that movie that we wouldn't do today, But I don't think that we should take that movie and cancel it, remove it from anything. I don't think we should ban it. I don't think that we should edit it. I don't think we should leave it in its original sense and have absolutely no discussion about it. So what they did with that was they left the movie intact exactly the way that it was when it was released. But they put subtitles in the movie, and under those, they maybe not subtitles, but descriptions of, hey, listen, back in such and such a year, this was considered to be okay. This was something we did. However, since we've learned blah, 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 this is not a good way to be. If we could do this with everything, I would love it. That brings us up to date with why the hell is dating so terrible right now? So over the years, and I'm gonna try to keep this concise. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm gonna have a hard time with this. But there used to be a point in time where there was a structure to dating. It was a patriarchal structure. I know people don't like the word patriarchy right now, but that's the way it was. Women didn't work. Women lived at home. Some women didn't drive. And if they did, they drove their parents' cars. Women were just less independent in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And there were tropes that were passed around at that time. One of the most popular tropes, and some of the ones that have lasted until today, were things like, men were providers at that time. So the whole structure of dating, and again, I'm not going to go too crazy because I've said this in previous podcasts, and so I don't want to repeat myself a ton of times about the same thing. But basically, the structure of dating in courtship is basically built on a patriarchal structure. It's based on an old-fashioned concept where women didn't work and men, that whole you need to, make it worth my while. You need to come pick me up and take me out and spend dinner on me. And, I'll talk to you for 4 hours. And the pleasure of my company is an old-fashioned concept. And it's based on a time where women did not work. They didn't have a whole lot of means. So for, it was time for money. Men would come in. It wasn't obviously a prostitution, but I mean, obviously in some places it probably was called the same thing. But basically, we were all within our little neighborhoods and regions and everybody knew each other. But if you were a man and you knew of a woman that you wanted to date, there was a structure, a courtship that went on, a ritual that you would perform, you would go to the house, you would bring flowers to the parents, and the woman lived there with her parents, and you would have to go there, put up with 20 questions from the father, make sure that he knew that you wanted to make sure his daughter was safe. And, you took her out to dinner and maybe you brought her home by 10 o'clock. You picked up the check, you dropped her off, you walked her to the door, the whole bit. That was all constructed around where we were at that time, long before feminism took hold, obviously, in a big way. It had started in the 50s, but, we weren't in the 70s yet. So some of those tropes that came with that old-fashioned structure are still repeated today. You'll still hear women say, well, for the pleasure of my company. Technically, the foundation to that is not in existence anymore. It's nice to say, but it doesn't really have any kind of grounding anymore. Being that we're all working. We all may own houses or own cars or have jobs or, so the independence and the fact that men technically had more money than women is not really the case anymore. But some of the stuff we were taught to do in that time, it's now starting to kind of fade away, but for a very long time, it really remained consistent. And some of it is, hey, listen, this guy might not be he might have the best personality. He might be kind of an asshole, or he may not have the best social etiquette. Or as women, we were kind of taught, and again, I'm not going to say this is every woman and every man in the world, but the norm was, well, he's not so great with social graces. And as women, we would come in and we would kind of teach them, oh, you need to be patient with him. You need to, the concept of us hurting men's feelings, and don't get me wrong, I don't think we should be looking to hurt anybody's feelings on purpose. But as women, we are taught to be very careful and walk tiptoe a lot of times when we are talking to men because we don't want to hurt their feelings. And as women, of course, we're taught the default of politeness. So we're now in a place where we can either decide to teach men how to treat us, which has been going on for years. For the most part, and I'm going to get to a positive note for men in a minute. And if you're a man and you're listening, do not tune me out. I'm not done here. But society is society. The good guys out there, the good guys, the ones that really are not doing anything with an agenda, who are just really looking for somebody to settle down with, this is really their time right now. It doesn't maybe seem like it's their time, but with some of the dating tactics that I've seen lately, we've decided we're not going to teach men how to treat us anymore, because that muddies the waters, and we've been doing that since the 50s. Several of us have gotten, and not me, obviously I've not ever been married, but some of us have gotten into marriages with people that we've kind of sort of walked through social etiquette. And there's a certain length that, men are sort of in that dance of, okay, well, hey, what can I tell you? I'm just a dumb jock. What do I know? What do I know? And women kind of step in and say, oh, don't you worry about it. Don't worry about it. We go to a party. I'll do all the talking. This kind of stuff that went on, which was fine because, like I said, there was a different kind of structure in the household back then. And the women were the social ones. Technically, a lot of the time they were not at a job. They were working, networking with the community on the ground, dealing with other wives in the neighborhood, the local bank, the grocery store, the church. Women were making inroads with society in the region that they lived in the neighborhood they lived in, because they were that was what they did. They drove around the neighborhood, or they maybe didn't drive because there was a point in time where men took the cars to work and that was it. But they basically got stuff done as men were off to work. So all of the sort of dinner parties and things that went on, women sort of organized a lot of things that went on with a social aspect, right? And men were the guys that showed up, made a couple jokes, poured some drinks, brought the cigars out, that kind of thing. Talked sports, talked racehorses, talked about the economy, talked politics, whatever. But we're now at a point where, men aren't providing most of us a living financially. That's not something that we're leaning on anymore. And that used to be sort of a compromise for somebody who didn't have all of their shit together. And so a guy could be a really good earner, but not necessarily a great person to sit around and talk with at a dinner party. And you would just sort of make a compromise with that. Hey, his dad worked in this factory for 30 years and he got a job at the same factory. And I know he's going to be taking care of the house and the kids. And, I don't have to worry about the lawn being cut, and I don't have to worry about the bills being paid. And I'll cook. As long as he brings me the groceries, I'll cook. And yeah, he's not the best person to talk to. And sometimes he's got a temper, or sometimes he's just an idiot, or whatever. But these are things that I'm willing to put up with for the fact that my kids have a roof over their head and we are secure and we have financial stability. That compromise isn't really panning out anymore for people. I would say namely women. I'm noticing that a lot of guys are kind of coming forth with that same, oh, shucks, aw, shucks. I don't know what can I say? I don't know how to do this. I'm not sure how to do that kind of thing. And maybe that's something that's been handed down. And women are a little less okay, let me help you with that. And a little more well, you really should be knowing how to do this. I'm seeing that happen. So the difference is, rather than us saying, hey, here's what we like, because what we're doing when we say, here's what we like, it appears to be that we're training somebody how to teach us what to do. A lot of times, and I've seen it happen in several marriages and relationships, somebody will be told several times what somebody likes and just doesn't do it. Now, I don't know. Is that because they don't want to? Is that because they're trying to be mean? Or, did you compromise with somebody that really wasn't your type, or really wasn't a match for you? And then are you trying to tweak something? Are you trying to, that whole, it goes back to are you trying to change somebody? I don't know that it's 100% that, but did you meet somebody that, hey, the chemistry was there and the two of you liked each other, but you didn't necessarily have all the same views in life and you didn't necessarily have the same goals or direction, but you got together and you had sex for 3 months and, the fireworks went off and you decided to try to make a relationship out of it because maybe it's easier. Maybe you don't want to go somewhere and find somebody to settle down because it's too much work. I don't know. There are people who will make a relationship out of some good sex. And 9 times out of 10, that sex does level off and become not as exciting after maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 months, right? But the inroads are laid as far as is this relationship solid? Are we going to do something? And if people throw caution to the wind and say, well, fuck it, I could take 3 years to get to know this guy, but I don't have enough time. I don't have any time to waste. Let's just get married. Let's just live together, whatever. And there is a sense of urgency. It's even happening right now. And for different reasons in different parts of the country and in different decades in the past, there have been the same feelings. Somebody's going off to war or, whatever the case may be. Something happens where one or both people just say, you know what, we could go through the conventional process of learning who we are and what we want, or we could just say, fuck it, and jump in and just like hope it all works out. And a lot of people do that. I'm not really sure why, but maybe it's just not as romantic to make sure that you know the person you're with is like supposed to be for you. But at the end of the day, what we're getting is a better match, because what we're doing is, instead of saying, hey, to guys, hey, this is what I like, now you've got a good bunch of performative guys that come over and they do what you like because you said that was what you liked. But is it what they want to do? There's a difference. And so I'm noticing that women are veering a little more towards, you know what, I like what I like. And if somebody doesn't bring me what I like, then I'm just going to move on. It seems like it's picky, and it seems like it's, you're not giving somebody a chance. But then again, this is a trope that we've learned for 50, 60, 70 years, to give somebody a chance. Doesn't mean they're wrong, and it doesn't mean you're right. What it means is the two of you are not compatible. And a lot more people are not compatible than we would like to believe. And I believe that years ago, these tropes kept us on this like path with people that we weren't matched with. And we just said a lot of dumb shit. What you would call, nod to Amanda Montell, what you would call, when I think of it, I will bring it up. Sorry. It's a thought terminating cliche. That's what that is. I'm sorry. I'm a little fried. It's the end of the day, but that's something that you say that just kind of like puts you in a position where you just don't question something. And if somebody says it to you enough times, you just kind of go down that road. And I've mentioned this before, but cold feet is definitely one of those things. Cold feet is a thought terminating cliche all day long, because most people that have cold feet and don't want to get married, it's an instinct that they almost can't ignore to the day of the wedding. And then everybody steps in and tries to convince them that they're fine, they're doing the right thing, they just have cold feet. But in my opinion, cold feet is a really strong instinct trying to tell you, what are you fucking doing? Do this. You have like 5 minutes, you have 10 minutes before like you make a mistake, and then it's going to cost you 30 years of your life. That's what cold feet is. I believe that if you're marrying somebody that you really matched with and you really want to be with and you know you're in the right place, I don't think cold feet happens. But what do I know? I've never been married, so what do I know? But I have friends that have been married, that are married and are happy and have been in marriages for years that never had that problem. And I have several friends that are divorced at this point, and it's like a consistent story. Every single one of them has had cold feet, and it was like the day of the wedding, it was like the worst ever. And then somebody slapped them in the head and said, well, hey, we spent all this money on this wedding or whatever. And then just made them go through with it and said, you just have cold feet. It'll go away. Right? So again, I'm convinced that cold feet is like a big warning coming from your insides that's telling you, what are you doing? Like, this has all been fun. And it's been fun to go, try cakes out, listen to bands and see what you'd like to listen to and all that kind of stuff. Well, like, you're down to the wire here and you get the wrong person at the end of that aisle. And what are you doing? Like, just leave. That's what I think it is. Anyway, I believe that we're now shaking off all that crap. I call it propaganda that we've been taught for years and years and years, from whether it be Hallmark or whether it be, obviously, I think a lot of romance crap is commercialized, and I think it's only set in stone for profit. And then a lot of us just sort of take it internally as like some kind of guide light or proof that something is romantic or that's meant to be, or whatever the case may be, because we've been hearing it for so long. But what's happening now is that we're getting down to reality. And a lot of that stuff that we learned for 70 years or whatever, 100 years, is being challenged and questioned. Because to be honest with you, a lot of that stuff isn't working. It's not working. So now there's like, a movement that's something like, from what I can see, and if you haven't listened to my podcast about burn haystack dating method, in a previous podcast, I went over that a little bit. But what you're doing now, and it's not that men shouldn't do this too, because I think they should. But women tend to be the ones that do it. We tend to compromise more. We tend to become what we think men want. We kind of put ourselves in these categories and we compromise who we are to kind of like get what we're looking for and then hope it doesn't go anywhere, right? But is somebody that's not right for you that goes somewhere, is that a bad thing? So now we're just kind of going in saying, back to that method of we're going to burn the haystack down and get the needle we want, rather than pick through each and every piece of hay and go, is there a needle here? Is there a needle here? You mean you can do that for like 50 years, right? We're just like taking a match to the whole thing. And so when somebody comes along that isn't doing what you want, and obviously within reason, I mean, you don't want, I've said this before, if you want a guy with a truck and you want him to have a blue truck and he has a red truck, I think you can kind of work with that. That's ridiculous if you think that that's an elimination. But there are things that you might like in a relationship, and there are people out there who will give you what you might like just because they're the type of personality that will lend itself to what you're looking for. And there's less effort. No relationship is completely easy, but there's less effort in a relationship like that. I don't personally like flowers every single day or every other day, they're okay, but honestly, I'm not like gaga over flowers. There's like a lot of a concept around flowers that like I don't necessarily dig. I'm not saying I don't like them, but they don't really do. I don't go out of my way and do cartwheels over flowers. I just don't. So, why would I go with a guy that brings me flowers every day? Because that's the way he expresses himself, and then like try to like vehemently change him and tell him to do something different. Now, I'm not saying, I'm using this as an example. This is probably not a huge deal breaker, but as just like a topic of conversation, that's just like an argument that's like never going to end. If he's never going to stop giving me flowers because that's the way he thinks it should be, and I'm always going to be frustrated when I get flowers, that's just like friction. Like, what's the point of that, right? With the way that it's going now, and the internet coming along, obviously there's dating sites out there and stuff like that. But the thing that's most important about the internet, it's all good and bad, right? So the internet is like really, really good and has a lot of productive stuff going on with it, right? The fact that the internet exists has caused a lot of things to change. There's good and bad in that. One of the things I think is an upside to the internet is women are able to trade information. That's a big thing. Now, if you're not a woman, that's, you're either a guy that's sympathetic to women, but if you understand what I'm saying, men used to isolate women and sort of do things, and women would walk around like questioning whether or not they were the only ones going through something. That went on for years. What we're learning now is, women are trading information like, hey, I'm talking to this guy online and he said this, or hey, I'm dating this guy and he sent me a text like this. This is stuff that I don't want to say, I don't know how to explain it, but there's a place where women can go now and just be like, this is happening. And like 20,000 women can be like, oh yeah, that happens to me too. That's a big deal for a woman to see that they're not the only ones dealing with this stupid thing, that they thought they were crazy. And again, I'm getting to good guys in a minute, but guys that are not so good, guys that have control issues and have domestic abuse issues and have jealousy issues and insecurity issues. Guys like that usually don't want to take on the accountability that this is who they are and what they're dealing with. They're usually going to throw it at the person they're with and say, this is your fault. It's just typical. I don't know. I mean, I do know why it is. If you're insecure, of course, you don't want anybody you don't want to actually face that you have issues, right? So you're going to tell everybody around you that they're causing you to do whatever you're doing. But at the end of the day, there's the gaslighting that goes on, and I really don't like the word gaslight right now because it's such a buzzword and everybody's using it for everything. But the actual original definition for gaslighting is, and I should know this because I grew up with it, making somebody think that they're crazy, or something that they think you're doing to them and telling you you're doing this to me, and you're saying to them, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not doing anything like that. You're crazy. You're making this shit up. That's gaslighting. It's so much easier to make a woman doubt herself and gaslight her about what it is you're doing to her when she's got no point of reference, right? What's happening now, unfortunately, for men that are this way. Again, this is great for good guys, but not good for not so good guys. And sorry, but I don't think that good guys that aren't good and that are manipulative and insecure and looking to do damage, these guys are going to end up getting called out. And I'm all for that. What it does is it eliminates these guys and it kind of leaves the way for some better guys to come along that we can actually appreciate. But before I get that far, if you're talking to 40,000 women that have had guys tell them the same thing and they get in the room with each other, whether it be online or not, that's not going to work anymore. So if you're gaslighting some woman into thinking that she's crazy because you cheated on her or you didn't come home for 3 days or whatever the heck it is, you took her for her bank account or whatever the heck it is a guy that's not a good guy, and you blame her and tell her that she's nuts and there's no way that what she thinks is happening, and she has nowhere to go or talk to about anything because everything had to be private and individual years ago. Everything was whatever happened within somebody's home was their business. That's great if two people want to be private, but it's not great if one person needs to talk to somebody about some shit happening in their house that nobody knows about. And in the 50s and 60s and 70s, women who got their ass beat weren't able to talk about it. If they did, it just got worse. And a lot of people around them didn't want to hear about it. This is how it was back then. So now these women can actually get on like a wire and talk with each other about this. And what they're noticing is that the patterns are similar, right? All of them are going through the same exact thing, the step-by-step process of it. There are women who've already been through it and left that they can find and talk to. There's women that are that are therapists for this sort of thing that they can talk to. There are women going through the exact same thing they're going through at the same time that they can talk to. And lastly, there are women that are starting to go through it and not understanding the signs that these women can talk to and have them avoid the situation. So all of that is good for women that are going through this. And let me stop and say there are men that are getting abused. There are things going on that are the other way around. It's just more often that women are the abused type. I'm not saying men don't get abused or that anything like that is not happening in the opposite. But it's a lot more common or prevalent just because of the way society is that women are the victims of this. So, and this is good because decent men that are good, that are dating, you don't want women who've been through this. And so therefore women shouldn't have to go through this to begin with. And so this is just creating a whole new army of healthier, more aware women who just aren't going to fall for the bullshit from guys that aren't worth their time, right? Moving on to good men. To me, this is like the good guys are about to win here because what we're looking for is wholesome, decent men. We want men who we want men who are where we're at, right? There's this rumor going around that women all want guys that are 6 feet tall and make 6 figures and all this other stuff. I think that's propaganda, and I think it's made up by guys who can't get what they want, and so therefore they have to have a reason for that. Instead of I have a shitty personality and I can't, I complain too much or I have a negative personality and therefore nobody wants to date me. It's much easier to point to some guys over there that women really want. Say, well, everybody wants that guy over there, so the rest of us are all going to have to suffer. And in my circle, and I have a pretty big circle, that's not happening. It's not actually happening. There's also contradictory stuff and tropes that are going on, like, well, all women want guys that don't have jobs and don't this and don't that. But on the other hand, they'll complain all women want men who make 6 figures. And it's kind of like, well, you kind of have to pick one. You can't complain about both of those things. Which is it that we're doing? Is Is it a narrative that suits your situation today, and then tomorrow you're going to have a different conversation about it? But to me, the really good guys, the ones that are substance heavy, the guys that are robust, decent, like humble, hardworking, and it doesn't matter how much money they make, but they're hardworking. They're decent. Maybe they're protective, but intelligent guys you can talk to, guys you can actually sit and have a conversation with. And guys that most importantly are like trying to improve themselves as people. I got to throw in good fathers. I'm like a sucker for a guy who's a good father. I love it. I have my own personal reasons for that. But it's good to see a guy who just really loves his kids and just really wants to spend time with his kids and just really wants to make sure his kids are well taken care of, happy, and that they get time with them, right? That's attractive to me, but it's attractive to a lot of women. So the good guys are like sort of going to come to the surface, because what we're doing right now is en masse, we are eliminating a lot of guys, I don't care what they say to you, that don't have their shit together. They need therapy. Therapy is a big thing. I personally believe that men should be in therapy. I don't care what anybody says. There's nothing wrong with going to a therapist. And when Dave gets back in this podcast, he will agree with that. There's nothing wrong with like going and talking to somebody about your shit and getting it straightened out. And it's almost like not a requirement for me, but it's really up there at this point that somebody that I talk to in a romantic sense or as a prospect has had some kind of therapy. Because I live in New England, and the therapy in New England is like drink and punch drywall, and, you know, we're sick of it. This is not the kind of thing we want to see anymore. You know, that's not therapy. We want men in our lives that, one, have a good circle of like healthy men around them that they can talk to and relate to and maybe have as role models. But at the end of the day, if they want to make themselves better and they've been through the death of somebody close to them or job loss or, you know, illness or anything like that, and they need an outlet, there's absolutely nothing wrong with a man that's been to therapy or that is in therapy. I'm all for that. And that's something that's going to be an attractive quality to me. And honestly, there's a lot of women around me that I know that feel the same way about that. So this whole thing about men being in therapy makes them weak and blah, blah, blah. I don't want to hear about that. Everybody can use therapy. There's like no downside to it if it's done right. So I cannot knock that. I'm all for that. So basically what I'm saying is if you're a good guy, if you're a nice guy, if you're a guy that like, you know, just can't catch a break, but you really a decent person and you know you're a decent person. I'm not talking about people who think they're decent or and refuse to look at any of their quirks or any of their dysfunctions, right? Unfortunately, people that think they're great and are dysfunctional and insecure probably wouldn't know if that's how they are because they refuse to look at themselves. So I guess I can't direct anything at those guys, but that's okay. Because women, we all have this like sort of running tally of the things that they do and say, and we're just getting real wise to a lot of it. And there was a point where somebody could convince us that what they were doing was wrong and they didn't understand it. And, you know, the aw shucks thing would kick in and we'd be like, oh, this guy's, you know, he's cute or he's good and bad or whatever. So I'm going to let that go. That's not happening as much anymore. Coming correct is a good thing. Now, at my age, obviously, it's a different story. Now, if I was 22, I might be a little more like, all right, I'm 22. The guy I'm talking to is 26. Wasn't very long ago we came from the womb, so I guess I can give this guy like a week or two to get this shit together. But up in my 40s and 50s and 60s, in this realm of my life, if guys are stepping to me incorrect, it's just like, where have you been? What have you, dude? You know, there's only so much time you can take to become a better person. And if at like that point in your life you're not doing it, it's real easy to kind of be like, I don't think this is going to happen. Here's somebody who like had a good 30 years to get this shit straight, and they're kind of coasting on the, you know, Now, again, I'm not going to tell you what we see in profiles that we decide, we don't want to deal with. Basically, what we're looking for is something that works for us. That's all I'm going to say. And if it doesn't, we kind of gently dismiss it. And we're not going to discuss it anymore. We're not going to go through the aw shucks, or we're not going to go through the Schrodinger's joke where you say something really distasteful and then we say we don't like it. And then you say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. Or I'm sorry, you can't take a joke. We're not going for that anymore. But anyway, we're not going for a lot of things that we know now kind of what they mean or what's under the surface of some of the things that we're seeing. And it's very common. A lot of the stuff is so common that it can't be mistaken because we've seen it 600 times. And sometimes we've seen it 600 times, plus 2 or times 2 from like the same person. And there's only so much of the redundancy we can go through before we see that a person is not improving and they're not, I guess, making an effort, right? So basically the dating scene now is going to be more like, if this person comes to me and does something I like, we're good until he doesn't do something I like. And then we're done. And that's pretty much it. And again, this is major stuff. This is not going to be like little things like the color of your truck. But there are some things that you do that will get you eliminated as a guy, not because you're a bad person, but just because we can see that it's not going to be a match. And what's the point of that? Can we stick around and try to make it a match and then, 10 years from now decide that it wasn't one, but we wasted 10 years? And that's good for both you and the person you're dating. It's not bad for either one of you to kind of like nip it in the bud, right? When it comes down to your true personalities and who you actually are. So anyway, that's that. Now, the second half of this podcast, is going to be something that I call concepts. But again, I wanted to make a quick note, well, not a quick note, so of course we're 41 minutes into this at this point, and of course I was going to do this really quickly. But I'm not going to edit this. I'm just going to throw it up just like it is. Because tomorrow's Thursday and I'm doing this under the wire. But my summary on what I just got done talking about is that, dating really sucks. And it sucks really bad right now. But I think it's because we're starting to shake off the reality that we have been trying to compromise for so many decades. I guess fooling ourselves that there was way more out there than there is. But at the same time, there's a compounded effect of a bunch of social media has happened. I mean, we're 20 years into social media, probably more like 25 good years into it. And that's changed attitudes. Our society's become bigger but smaller, meaning bigger as far as there's more people to choose from, but smaller in the sense that we don't really know anybody like we used to. So there's a lot more strangers out there that we're dealing with, right? And the third thing is that basically the pandemic came through, OnlyFans came through. There's some stuff that came through that I think has caused extreme loneliness and extreme desperation, yet some social skills have gone by the wayside based on just like the way society has changed in the past like 4 years. It's actually been amazing how things have changed. Right? And I think it's 2012 that everybody started looking at their phones. That's when all that started happening, right? And that's also changed society. We used to have to go out to socialize. And now the socialization happens at any time that you want on your phone, whenever you're ready. That changes society a lot. Anyway, we have overall, we're now getting a realistic look basically at what the dating pool actually is. We didn't have that before. We're now, if we eliminate people who aren't a match for us, because we're just like, you know what, once we start to become, individualists and we start to understand that we like our own company, and there are people out there that can't stand to be by themselves, so don't get me wrong on that. But once we decide we love our own company enough not to just compromise ourselves to be with anybody, Then we start getting a lot pickier about who we entertain. And when we do that, we start to see like the reality of what's actually available. And I believe that there's always been crappy options out there, but we've always taught ourselves, or we've always told ourselves, maybe because we couldn't stand the reality, that there's plenty of people out there and it's just a matter of time. All those kind of things are, again, tropes and thought terminating cliches to keep ourselves from like the reality of what's really happening. So I think now we're starting to actually face it. Hey, there are a lot of guys out there, but they're not dating material. Same thing for men. You know, there are a lot of women out there, but they're not dating material. We're now deciding, okay, well, I'm going to stay single until I find somebody that makes sense for me. Instead of just saying, well, let me go out and date anybody and then try to make it work. Let me try to put 10 years into it and make it do something. We're now understanding that like that's just a waste of 10 years of our life. And if we can kind of catch it before we get that far in and walk to the side of it and walk around it and keep going, we're probably better off doing that. So that doesn't narrow the amount of people that are out there, but it does narrow down the amount of people that we're willing to compromise. Oh, no, sorry, not compromise. That's not the word we want. That we're willing to entertain or to consider, right? Those are the prospects that we want. You want people who are going to work for us, right? People have always said to me, well, you know, you've never been married. No, I've never been married. I've avoided my second divorce is how I see it. Because I could have got married out of high school. I've dated guys that I could have married. I've discussed marriage with 3 different guys at any given time in my life. And I could have just married the wrong person. And so I would have been married, but I would have ended up divorced. So I'm saving myself time and money, right? I guess I could have gone through a marriage to say I had one. Does that make me a different person? Maybe. But to me, I just avoided 2 marriages and 2 divorces. I probably would have been where I'm at now. Or maybe not exactly where I'm at now. Obviously, maybe I'd live in a different place or whatever, but maybe I'd have a couple of kids. But at the end of the day, I would still probably be single. I would still probably not be involved with anybody. Who knows? I don't think if I was going to marry anybody that I was already with, I think that definitely wouldn't have worked out because it didn't. But anyway, that's the first half of this. All right, more next week. In the meantime, check out our website, www.lanaanddave.com. And that's where all of our social media is, all of our platforms for the podcast. Download, subscribe, give us a 5-star review. Part 2 next week. Bye-bye. Hey, you just listened to Love and Life with Lana and Dave. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please share the podcast, leave us a comment or review, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any new content. We'll see you soon.